In this tutorial, we're going to spend about 20 minutes and take you through one of the examples that we covered at the 2016 user group. Essentially, this was in a larger set of videos at the user group there, and was really looking at how we can create tools using the software. In this case, what we're going to focus on is a print block and a jig. So we're going to look at the drawing and toolpathing steps to create the parts. In reality, this would actually be cut out of two separate pieces of material, but for the purposes of the demonstration, we'll do it in one. And this particular example would be compatible with VCarve Desktop, VCarve Pro, and Aspire version 8.5. So I'm going to start by creating a new file, and we're going to make this 12 inches by 12 inches, and the thickness of material we're going to work with here would be 0.625 of an inch. And I'm going to set the datum position to be in the lower left corner. Now the first thing that I need to derive all my other vectors from is the luggage tag that we are going to use our print block in order to print on. Now the luggage tag is effectively 120 millimeters by 60 millimeters. So even though I'm working in inches here, we can still use the calculation boxes to allow us to do that. So I'm going to click on the icon to draw a rectangle. We'll set that up so that we're at x0, y0, and going to set the width of this up to be 120 asterisk I equals. So that's how we get to 120 millimeters, and the other side will be 60 asterisk I equals, and that'll show us the height there. So if we hit create now, we're going to see a rectangle which is 120 millimeters by 60 millimeters, but that's been converted into inches. So if we hit F9 on the keyboard now, we can center that in the middle of the job here. And next thing we're going to look at is basically creating what will be the outside of our print block. So I'm going to draw a rectangle here, and we're going to make this 6 by 4, hit apply and close, and then we'll just snap that to the center of our rectangle there. So now we've got our luggage tag shape sat kind of in the middle right of our block overall here, but in order to insert the luggage tag in and out of the printing block, we're going to need a little bit of space. So I'm going to move it over 10 millimeters to the right. So let's say move selected objects relative to its current position. I'm going to say 10, and again to convert this into inches, because I'm working in inches here, I'm going to say 10 multiplied by I equals, and apply, and that'll just move that over there. Now I'm going to select these two vectors, and we'll move those down to an absolute position. So we'll select the lower left corner of this absolute position of x 0.75 and y 0.75, and hit apply and close there. Okay, so now we have our two vectors. We have enough space around the outside to be able to machine these. I'm going to make a copy of these that'll create the top half of our jig. So I'm just going to select them both. I'm going to put the cursor in the lower left corner, hold Control down, click and drag, and just snap that to the top corner here. Then I'm going to select both of these, and again just make a space between them. I'm going to move them up relative to their current position 3/4 of an inch in Y, hit apply and close. So now we've got our two sets of vectors there. Now on the bottom part of the jig, what I want to be able to do is pocket around the rectangle that we're going to slide the luggage tag into. Now if I just pocketed between these two rectangles at the moment, then I'd leave material in the corners here due to the roundness and size of the tool. So what I want to do is create an area that's offset slightly from this that we can pocket. So I'm going to select that vector, offset outwards by 0.2 of an inch, and hit offset and close. So there's my larger vector. That means when we pocket between that and this inner rectangle here, that we'll clear off the area we need to. Now what I want to do to create that region we're going to pocket is select this vector, shift and select the inner rectangle, and use the subtract vectors icon there. So now we've got that vector, we're going to pocket that down to 1/4 of an inch deep. So I'm going to right mouse click, move that onto a new layer, and for organizational purposes we'll call that pocket underscore 025, and we'll just make that a different color and hit OK. So now we've moved that vector onto a different layer there, and that'll come in handy when we get to the machining side of things. Next we're going to come up to the top here, and what I want to do is create an area that we're going to machine through that will allow the our printing block to fit into. So I need to make this a little bit shorter than the end here. So again, we're going to grab this rectangle and I'm going to say set selected object size. I'm going to set the anchor to the lower left. I'm going to unlink XY, and I want to make this 20 millimeters shorter. So again, I'm working in inches here, but if I put in minus open brackets 20 asterisk I close brackets equal, we can use the calculation there to take 20 millimeters away from an inch value. So this represents the size of my printing block and the size of the area I'm going to machine. Now what I've got to think about is the fact that when I put this part on top of this part here, I'm going to need a little bit of clearance in the corners here. I'll also need that clearance when I slide the luggage tag in here. So I'm actually going to take this vector and offset it by a very small amount to give me that clearance. So I'm going to offset it outwards by 0.01 of an inch. I'm going to tell the software to delete the original, to create sharp corners, and to select new. And if we zoom in, right in here, we may be able to see this when I offset it. So if I hit offset, you can see that's got bigger, but that is actually a very, very small amount that is offset outwards by. So next, I need to make sure that the tool's going to be able to clear out those corners and make sure that I can fit sharp objects into them, like the corners of the luggage tag, and also so they'll fit over this piece on the bottom here. So I'm going to go ahead and add in some fillets. In this case, we're going to use T-bone fillets, and I want these to be a value that's slightly larger than the radius of the tool I plan to use to cut this out. And the tool I'm going to use is a 1/4 inch end mill. So if I make this value for the fillet slightly larger than 1/8 of an inch, that should be correct. Now I can click on the top and bottom of the two flat sides there and extend those out. And now I know that my printing block will fit in there as well as my luggage tag. Next, I want to pocket this area down at the side here to provide a space for the luggage tag to slide in and out of. So I'm going to draw a rectangle, I'm going to snap to the top, drag to the bottom, snapping and let go there, and then put in a width of 1 inch and hit create and close. So now I have this vector here that's going to represent a pocket, and I need to machine this down a bit more than the distance we made this pocket here for. So in there, I'm going to right mouse click, I'm going to move that onto a layer, and we'll call this layer pocket underscore O-3125, and that just represents the depth I want to machine it down to. It could be named anything, this. I've just done that really as a way for me to remember it when I come to set up the toolpaths. And we'll change the color, hit OK, and we can see the layer for our pocket, or the vector for our pocket has been created and put onto that layer. Now the next thing I'm going to create is the vector that will represent our printing block. Now I want this to fit inside the area here, so I'm going to click on the rectangle tool, I'm going to snap from the corner here to the corner down here, and right mouse click to accept that. Then I need some clearance. It'll be too tight of a fit if I make my printing block exactly the same size as the hole that we've got here. So I'm going to go to the offset vectors tool, I'm going to offset it inwards, and this time I'm going to go 0.03 of an inch, 30 thousandths of an inch. I'm going to again say I want to delete the original and hit offset, and you can see if I zoom in there that that's just provided me with a bit of clearance around there. I want to be able to easily get that in and out, but roughly have it always positioned in the same place as I put the printing block in and print in the same place on the label. So now we can take this vector we've just created, and I'm going to drag that down here. I'm not going to make a copy, just roughly align it with the bottom edge of this here. Now I know I've offset that inwards, so that is the right size. So now holding the Control key down to make a copy and Shift to drag this vertically, I'm just going to click and drag it up, and then I'm going to make another copy. And then for this top copy, what I'm going to do is just size that down and just snap that to the midpoint there, and again holding Shift and Control, create another copy of that vector there. So understanding in the software how to use these shortcut keys like Shift and Control when you're clicking and dragging things around will make it much quicker for you to edit and lay out your vectors. Now I'm just going to use the arrow keys to jog these around. Should have enough space in between each of those to machine. We can always adjust them subsequently though if we need to. Now the last thing I need to bring in terms of vectors is the actual data that we want to have on our print blocks. In this case I've pre-created it, but you could create this using the text tool, you could draw your own vectors, or you could import an image and fit the vectors to that, which is actually what I did in order to create my design. Here though, I say to save a bit of time, I'm just going to import an EPS file and hit open. So here's my two designs that I want on my two printing blocks. I'm just going to hold Shift and drag a box around this set to deselect them and hit G on the keyboard to group those, and then I'm just going to drag a box around this set here to reselect them and hit G in order to group those. Now I'm going to select the text, Shift and select the rectangle, and click on the Align Selected Objects tool and center the text within that rectangle there. Next we'll select this design here, Shift and select the rectangle, and then click the same icon to center that. So these represent what is going to be raised up and will be what will actually print when we apply the ink to the blocks. A couple of things I need to do before they'll be correct though. One is I need to reverse them, because when I print them I'm going to get the reverse of what we see here. Quick shortcut key to do that is just to select it and hit H on the keyboard, and that will horizontally mirror the object there around its own center point. Then I'm going to select the decoration here and do the same thing, hit H in order to mirror that. So now we've reversed the data. The other thing I need to do is make sure that when we machine this area away to leave this raised up, that it actually comes past the edge of my print block so I don't leave any material in the corners. So I'm just going to select these two vectors here, offset those vectors outwards, and we'll just say 0.15 of an inch there, hit offset and close. Now I want to make sure that these vectors are on their own layer, and I think because of when I imported that data it created a layer there, they should be on there. We should be able to just double click on the end here in order to select the vectors on that layer. That's not quite picking that up there. Select layer vectors, so I'm not doing a very good job with my double clicking, so I'm just going to click on the little notepad at the end there and say select layer vectors, and I can see that the correct vectors are on that layer as I suspected. So if we just click on the name, we can change that, and I'll call that vcarve_o-1 again to kind of help me out, and we'll just change the layer color to orange. The top here, this has vectors on it that are all going to act as the cutout. If I want to see that, I can say select layer vectors and we can see those there. So I've organized my vectors. I've drawn all these vectors here, derived from my original vector that represented the luggage tag, that 120 by 60mm luggage tag. So I'm finished the design, and at this stage I'm ready to go over to the toolpath tab and start calculating the toolpaths. So I'm going to click on the icon to switch over to the toolpaths tab. First thing we need to do is check our material setup, so I'm going to click on the set button, and here I'm just going to have a quick glance down and make sure everything looks correct. I've got Z0 off the top of the block, thickness of the material is correct, XY0 datum is the lower left corner. There's no model in this case, so I don't need to worry about the positioning. And then I just need to check that my rapids and home position are all safe for my particular setup. Hit the OK button. Now, so we can see both the 2D and 3D view, I'm going to hit the page up key on the keyboard. And that's just a shortcut key in order to put the 2D view on the left and the 3D view on the right. Now, when I calculate the toolpaths for this example, I'm going to use a feature that the software has that allows me to select vectors based on a set of rules. Now, you may remember that I've organized these vectors onto layers, and we can use that to help us. So I'm going to come up and click on the pocket toolpath. The first pocket I'm going to create is going to be 1/4 of an inch deep. I'm going to use this 1/4 inch end mill. I can hit edit if I want to check the parameters. I'm not going to worry too much about these values here. They would just need to be appropriate for your particular machine if you were to cut something like this. So I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to use an offset pattern for this. And as I say, I'm going to select the vectors not from the 2D view, but using this vector selection selector button here. So when I click on that, this gives me the different rules that I can apply to select the vectors. In this case, I'm going to say closed vectors on selected layers, and the layer I'm going to select is going to be pocket 0-25. I'm going to associate that with the toolpath. So if I did come to recalculate this toolpath, it would automatically recheck these rules for me. So you can see that automatically selected the vector from the 2D view, and now we can give this a name and we can hit calculate. We'll see the toolpath created. You can see that in the 3D view there, and I'm going to preview that, and I'm just going to apply a green color so we can see clearly that pocket there. So that's pocketed down to a depth of 0.25 of an inch. Next, again without going into the 2D view, I'm going to create another pocket toolpath. This one is going to go down to 0.3125, and the vector I'm going to select for it, again with the vector selector tool, is not on pocket 025 but is on pocket 03125. If I associate that and hit close, again you can see the correct vector's been selected there. And we'll just give that an appropriate name and hit calculate. And again, just for differentiation, we'll apply a color to the toolpath preview there, and I can see that part has been machined down for me there. Next, we're going to do our V-carving. Now in this case, I want to V-carve because I need the sharpness of the tool to give me the detail on the lettering and my graphic design, but I don't want to V-carve all the material away around it. We may as well use an end mill to do that a little bit quicker. So again, I'm going to use the selector tool to pick these. So I'm going to click on the V-carve engraving tool there. I'm going to go with a start depth of 0. I'm going to make sure the flat depth option is checked and put in a value of 0.1 of an inch. I'm going to select a 90-degree V-bit tool, 1/4 inch end mill, so make sure this use flat area clearance tool is checked. So if I check that, we're going to use a 1/4 inch end mill, use the offset pattern, and for the vectors I'm going to hit the selector button again, and this time select the V-carve 01 layer, and again associate that with the toolpath. Change the name, hit the calculate button, and let's just zoom into the 3D view, and we can see in the toolpath list we've got two toolpaths. One is going to clear away the majority of the material with the 1/4 inch tool, so let's preview that. I'll just give that an orange preview color, so you can see that's going to hog out the majority of the material. Then the V-carve toolpath is just going to clean up where that tool can't fit and give me all the detail around the lettering and my design. So if we select that, we'll give that a slightly different color, give that a red color, and preview that, and there you can hopefully see the difference between the two toolpaths. But now on this top surface we've got the area that we'll be able to apply the ink to, and when we print that down, that should give us the design on our luggage tag. Last toolpath we're going to calculate here is the cutout toolpath. Again, I'm not going to select the vectors from the 2D view. I'm going to go to the profile option and going to put in a cut depth. I want to go all the way through the material and slightly into my spoil board, so I'm going to use the calculation box function again to go Z, and got to go past the full depth of Z, which is the equivalent of the material block. I'm going to say plus 0.01 and hit equals on the keyboard to calculate that value there. I'm going to use the 1/4 inch end mill again, cutting outside the vectors. We are going to add tabs, but I haven't yet selected the right vectors to add them to, so I'm going to click on the selector button, change the layer to cutout. You can see that's automatically picked up the vectors here. We'll associate that and hit close. Now I want to add tabs to hold the part in place. Click on the edit tabs, and I'm just going to click a few of these where I would like the tabs to go that are going to hold my pieces still when we cut them out. So just popping them in there by clicking on the vector that are selected for this toolpath in what should be appropriate places to hold them. Next, we can give this toolpath a name, hit calculate. Because I've asked the software to go slightly past the thickness of the block into the spoil board, it will give me a warning, but I can just hit OK there because I am happy with that decision. If we maximize the 3D view and zoom in, we can now preview that selected toolpath as well. We can see how that part would be cut out and how the pieces will be held in place with the tabs. So in terms of what we've actually machined here, as I mentioned at the beginning of the demonstration, this would actually be done in 2 separate jobs, assuming you wanted to use different material. For the example I made, I cut the print block out of MDF, so I'd have just taken these vectors into another job and set that up, and I cut the jig, which is the parts on the left here, out of plywood. So the way this works is this top part of the jig would be cut out, we'd take the tabs off, and then it would flip over and connect onto here. And that would provide a little slot at the side that my luggage tag would be able to slide into, and from there I could take my print blocks, and these rectangles at the top just attach to the back side of the print blocks to act as handles, and then you can print through into the luggage tag by applying the ink to it, sliding it down, and the jig will just make sure that that is almost in exactly the same position each time you print it. If I wanted to output the toolpaths in this case all to a single file, what I may want to do is do the V-carve toolpath first, so I might move that up to the top of the list. Doesn't matter in this case whether I do that first or second. I could select it, choose the option to save the toolpath, say output all visible toolpaths to one file. In this case I only have one visible toolpath because that's the only toolpath that's checked. Choose the appropriate post processor for my CNC and hit save toolpath in order to save it. To output the rest, which all use the 1/4 inch end mill, I could just draw them all, make sure they're all visible, make sure they're in the order that I want to machine them, the cutout should be last, and again save that and save that as a single file that could then be machined. So that way, by doing it so that I do the V-carve or the V-bit tool first and then the 1/4 inch end mill tools, I'll only need to do one tool change to complete this project. So that concludes this demonstration. As we mentioned before, this video has been a bit of a test, and now if you can write on the forum whether it was successful or not, or what worked or what didn't work, we'd really appreciate that, and we'll then use that feedback in order to see how we might do other live streaming events or find an alternate method to do it if this has not worked particularly well. Thank you very much for watching.